Yes, yes. Oh, yes. Oh. I think long-term purpose of our meeting is how to build, how to create peaceful century, this 21st century, and peaceful world through inner peace. Inner peace through prayer are not adequate. Inner peace through awareness. I think everybody, I think 100% of people, you see, agree. Inner peace, with inner peace, full joy. Too much desire, of course, no question, too much anger, the person never be calm person. Very clear. Even animal, I think they do not want disturb because you see, they also want peace. So you see, use common sense. How to build peaceful world through inner peace. So now question is how to develop inner peace. We need more knowledge about the world or inner world. When we talk inner world, these emotions, minds. So academic sort of basis to introduce or to educate people, whether believer or non-believer, that's the individual business. But we are part of the humanity. Everybody wants peaceful world, happy world. That, you see, ultimately, destroyer of peace is anger, hatred, fear. Now, there is possibility to reduce these things. So therefore, you see, the long term, our aim is to create peaceful world. For that, compassion, 7 billion human beings. Potential there, as I mentioned this morning. So try to create compassionate humanity. Then our immediate sort of aim is the how to carry, educate from kindergarten up to university level. You see, this is our material not finalized. Then, as you mentioned, the wording, this word, is not my business. Those English scholars, your business. You see, discuss and choose right word. Then the whole sort of the text, we cannot sort of finalize advanced way. Simply make sort of plan, and then let some school, you see, teach, you see, according to that sort of the text. Then we'll see. I think private school, if possible. One school or 2 schools, then let's see what the effect, what the result. If you see some significant result come, then we can expand 10 schools or 100 schools. So while we are sort of carrying as an experiment, is to collect different ideas, different sort of advice. Then I think, if possible, annually this kind of meeting and discuss how to or what we need improvement where, what we need omit where more. So we can discuss. So these things, you see, not government order or something. So these, I think, should be something like evolution where. Carry, experiment, watch result, and then from time to time come together, discuss. So then this time, I especially ask concerned people, some Indians, invited here. And then I'm very glad, you see, number of sort of the Indian sort of teachers already. Reason, all these knowledge, my own sort of knowledge or our knowledge, is come from India. All these knowledge is your sort of, or say the traditional your sort of knowledge. In modern India, a little bit neglected. Now, real owner of this knowledge is you, not Tibetan. When you have these sort of very sophisticated knowledge about emotion, these things, we just eating meat, yak's meat, and this is something like bandit way, almost like bandit. You see, go here and there. Whenever you see some resistance come, crush. Sometimes I jokingly, you see, telling my Indian friend, you see, you brought us compassion and more patience, also the forgiveness. So we lost our own country. If we Tibetans still remain traditional way, I think we may not lose our country. So this is, of course, joke. So therefore, real owner of this knowledge is you, Indian. Now time come. I think I, as a messenger of India, I sort of make some kind of develop some awareness, interest about ancient Indian knowledge. Many scientists, many educationists. So now real responsibility is on your shoulder, not my shoulder. So you should take those Indians. Now you should take more active sort of effort, active role. Firstly, how to revive in this country about your own ancient knowledge, which not only ancient knowledge, but also very relevant to today's world. Or puja, these things something different. The real knowledge about emotion, about mind, or ancient Indian psychology. Really, we should not, you see, mix these things with religious belief. Then will not cover 7 billion human beings. Should take separate, purely academic subject. Then it will be universally acceptable. So like that. So that I want to share you. And then good result, peaceful world, within my lifetime will not achieve. My generation, or I think generation whose age, I think 30, 40, I think already is too much sort of absorbed existing sort of reality. So now our hope is future, the later part of or mid part of this century. Then at that time, I may be either in heaven or hell. So sometimes I jokingly is telling younger generation, even I will be in hell, I may get 1 week holiday and come to world, watch what is the situation. If world becoming more compassionate, and then when I return to hell, then I report the concerned sort of the sentient being in hell. Or now some part of your hell can now reduce, because you see, human being now really becoming more compassionate. If otherwise, more fighting, more killing, then I will report, hell must expand. A lot of people ready to come. So like that. So I really feel it is our generation's responsibility who observed So much violence, so much killing, so much injustice. So whether next generation seriously follow or not, that's up to them. But it is our responsibility to show them the present sort of existing sort of way of thinking, way of life, due to education, the present education system. That's difficult. So we already notice that most of the troublemakers are educated people, isn't it? So therefore, the education without sense of responsibility on the basis of, let's say, compassion, very difficult. So now that, according to Indian tradition, secular way, strictly secular way, we can teach. And now we have plenty of reasons, scientific findings. That's really bring conviction. As I mentioned at the lunchtime, of course, young children, I think, loves history, story. For me, story, even Buddha's own story, sometimes I'm skeptical. So just the story is this story. So practical sort of evidence, where practical evidence really brings conviction. That's common sense, common experience, and scientific finding. Okay, so that's all.
Thank you. I now request Shri Rajiv Mehrotra, Chairperson of the Foundation for Universal Response.
He's the chairperson. That's all right. You're
But chairperson, only blessing. Detailed work, chairperson do not know.
Anyway, I request Shri Rajiv Mehrotra to please take the mic.
Your Holiness, first on behalf of the people of India, I'm sort of confused whether I should apologize for your presence here or be grateful for your presence here. And I'd also appeal to your own sense of compassion that when you're in hell and reporting on us, that you will be compassionate. In your opening remarks, you talked about people in conflict and how there was so much conflict in the world, and there was pain, and there was dying. And at the Foundation, we have an initiative that has reached out across political divides, religious divides, to help cultivate compassion and peace within and peace without, in keeping with your aspirations. And interestingly, most of the presenters today have been women, and so this project too is led by 3 women sitting here who will give you a report on what we do. I just flag a few points that sort of that came up that circumscribes this, and A was to first pay a great compliment and our deep appreciation for the curriculum that you have developed. As a struggling student of His Holiness, I can say that it very deeply and in a very nuanced way, I think, embodies most of his ideas and philosophies. And most important, what we learn from Your Holiness is that you are heir to the most sophisticated mind training techniques. I mean, I just learned, as not an academic, about embodied understanding. And I think what His Holiness is really saying is that our reflexes, our deepest reflexive responses, need to be governed by compassion. And what are the mind training techniques that help cultivate them? And I think that your efforts in that direction are a very seminal step. And there are a number of curricula around this. And I really wanted to acknowledge that. And one of the aspects of our own work, and you will hear more about that, and I just wanted to propose this to what you're doing, is that apart from Your Holiness looking at curricula which extend from school and university, to maybe look at some workshop modules that can become summer courses, that can become programs and projects that can be done independent of school curricula, particularly for reaching out to students and spaces, as our initiative tries to do in areas of conflict, where someone may not be willing to give you 12 years of their time or a day every week. If we could be looking at something like that, and we would certainly be very interested in partnering with you on that. And also, as His Holiness mentioned, to develop a set of materials which could serve as advocacy for the cause, the empirical basis that His Holiness was saying. If you could help make that available, put that together to make the case for the widespread adoption of the idea. And I suspect, as we have tried, that this is something we may have to approach incrementally. I mean, I can't see a school willing to take this on for 13 years like that, certainly not in India. So I just wanted to make that before I hand this over to Meenakshi Gopinath.
Then I want to add one thing. As a chairperson of the Gaza Foundation Universal Responsibility, now, you see, I think last several years, you see, my dear friend Rajiv and your wife, I think really sort of making a lot of effort at annually some sort of meeting or something. But then I have the sort of view, not adequate. We have to sort of more activities and wider perspective. Recently, some of the ideas, you see, one branch in Sri Lanka, so such as, and then Bangladesh or some sort of nation. You see, and India also. You see, like Bangalore, South Indian, and then some other sort of places, Calcutta. I think you should sort of expand, you see, our sort of branch of our foundation and more sort of movement from wider perspective, right? That's just.
Widen.
We set up one sort of foundation, and you just a keeper of that foundation is not sufficient. You must expand. Like bird, you see, I sort of, because initially I nurtured. Now that bird,
The bird is not growing its wings.
So now time come. You see, you should expand and think, not only in Delhi area, but more wider. That's important. Thank you. Recently, I mentioned one occasion in Dharamsala. I mentioned, you see, I, as an old monk, and I think, generally speaking, a lot of experiences since age 16, meeting different people, including Chairman Mao Zedong, and so on. And also, you see, passing through difficult life. But, you see, difficult life is, I think, best period to gain more deeper experiences. So therefore, I have some sort of experiences, some knowledge out of experience, and also I think mainly Nalanda tradition. Analytical meditation, analyze one problem, see, immediately analyze why, how it happened. So that's very helpful. So some ideas, you see, I think develop from time to time, but no hand, just idea. So now I need more hand. This global responsibility also one of my hand, and then you also say one of my hand, and you also here daily. So now hand should move actively, then my brain not wasted. Without hand, without action, my brain just empty word, that's all. Really. Now time come, you say, already age 81, perhaps next 10 years, my life may be active. Then after that, I don't think. So, whether we like it or not, only 10 years. Then, my almost the final retirement eventually come. But world still remain. Human beings still remain. So we have to think seriously and accordingly. We have to act now, start now. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's a real honor to be able to present some of our work before this very engaged group. I'm also grateful to Tempala and Meenakshi for giving us this opportunity. As was mentioned, WISCOMP, it's an acronym for Women in Security, Conflict Management and Peace, but it's also an acronym for Wisdom and Compassion. This initiative started in 1999 under the aegis of His Holiness's Foundation for Universal Responsibility. And since then, we have been attempting to work in the area of fostering cultures of peace and creating ecosystems of peace, both across borders and boundaries, geopolitical borders and boundaries, and also within our own country, across states that are ridden with armed conflict, ethnic conflict. For example, in India, our work covers the Northeast and Kashmir, and wherever there have been interreligious riots. There have been three programs that we have been engaged in. One which brings young people from between India and Pakistan together to look at the kind of initiatives of developing compassion, understanding, and developing mutual trust, which are a part of your protocols. And also this whole business of trust building, which, as His Holiness mentioned, is at the core of understanding and compassion. Our work really involves young people. They are what we call the demographic dividend in this part of the world. And it has students, it has educators, it has NGO activists, and even young policymakers. We see education not just as the formal classroom space, but we look at it as a larger space to convert minds to a sense of the interconnectedness of all, not just sentient beings, but the universe that we inhabit. We also recognize that the notion, you have protocols for higher education, college and universities. The idea of the university as an ivory tower is now extinct. We talk about the engaged university, like we do about engaged Buddhism. So from these protocols, which are drawn from His Holiness's philosophy, and as Tenzin La had mentioned earlier, the idea of secular reflects what is enshrined in India's constitution as Sarva Dharma Samanatva, where you respect all different perspectives and philosophies that are aspiring towards a certain definition of truth. So we see your SEE, secular ethics in education, as beneficial for our multilingual, multi-religious, multi-ethnic fault lines. And we look at it really from how can we make our programs of inclusive education get over the marginalization and injustice that large numbers of people in our country and in this region feel and face and are continuously alienated from. The Indian government has brought in the right to education. And this RTE requires that every classroom must eventually have 25% children from marginalized and economically impoverished backgrounds. Now, how do we create a classroom where the rich and the privileged sit together with those who have been excluded and yet do it with inclusivity, with understanding, with love, with compassion? This is a great challenge, and I think your protocol has shown us, as Proust has said, that the real voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but actually in having new eyes. And so when we look at this heterogeneous classroom, the Indian educational environment today is much more heterogeneous than it has ever been before. People who never had access to education are now being sort of flooding the education space. Now, how do we deal with that? They come from completely different backgrounds. They have aspirations. They all desire happiness. Yet they must see their connectedness. How do we make them take responsibility? This is a challenge for us. And for your 5 areas that do resonate with us, but particularly, and I would like to echo the sentiment around this table, that we would, rather than look at competencies, we'd like to call them dispositions. Dispositions where, for example, ethical mindfulness and emotional awareness, forgiveness, as most of the teachers here have done, has informed our do no harm approach. When we go into areas of conflict, and especially when we are looking at young Indians and Pakistanis in the same room, we have to step into the shoes of the other. We have to move beyond stereotypes and prejudice. We have to move towards prejudice reduction before we can even begin to understand our different and competing realities. We also have to understand structural violence, because violence touches us in many ways. We have to talk about faith. Even those who don't have a religious background or are atheist or non-believers, as His Holiness says, we need to understand how faith becomes so violent in our part of the world. And faith touches the lives of so many people that we can't just wish it away. So in that sense, the secular ethic that His Holiness is talking about looks at it through a completely different prism rather than the secularism of the West, which is a kind of the secular versus. We are looking at creating spaces for what we call the sacred secular, where the sacredness in everyday life, the sacredness of the other's point of view, the sacredness of life itself, and a kind of ecosophy, which means that we are all connected to each other and in this planet, is actually foregrounded. The goddess Saraswati is the goddess of learning in the Hindu pantheon. And she has a vehicle, which is the white swan. It's called the Paramahansa. Now, the amazing thing about this white swan is that it is at home in different worlds, but it has what you call ethical discernment. It is able to separate the milk from the water, the grain from the chaff, and it is able to bring that critical analysis and look at received knowledge through the lens of critical analysis, and then become embodied in an understanding that allows it to live lightly on the planet, to live lightly in all 3 realms of consciousness. So what is it that we are attempting to do? We are looking at 5 or 6 areas. We believe that alone is knowledge that leads to liberation. When we talk about liberating ourselves and providing antidotes to negative feelings, I think knowledge is that which leads to that kind of liberation. We're also looking at creating global citizens beyond egocentric, idiocentric, even sociocentric views, to look at a more geocentric kind of understanding. We also are looking at the linkages between the local and the global, that every action that we take has resonances for many worlds. Everything that we speak, everything that we think. So, as His Holiness said, internal disarmament is what we have to work, not just nuclear arms, but internal disarmament is what we need to work at. And the Socratic spirit of putting our own certitudes to scrutiny every single time. So these protocols are only guides, because they always are in a context of change and flux. And every protocol has to be contextualized. With due respect, I would like to say that it would have to be contextualized so that it resonates with the student who comes from a slum background, comes into an elite school, feels alienated. The teachers don't know how to handle them. Their parents don't know how to look at the classroom space. So the classroom space has to be not just a ruminative space, not just an aspirational space, but a dialogic space and a healing space for us. In the Indian aesthetic tradition, we talk about the Navarasas, the 9 rasas or the feelings, envy, anger, hatred, revulsion. Finally, we come to Shanta, which is peace. But unless a person has experienced what it means to the body and the mind to go through these various rasas, she can never enter the domain of peace, which is in some senses embodied in Buddhahood and on the smiling face of His Holiness. So we do use Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, but we also are much more influenced by the 5 minds of the future, where the ethical mind, the creating mind, all those other minds are important. And increasingly, as His Holiness had said, what we say and how we say it is important. And so we want to talk about the mother tongue, not the mother tongue which we learn as children, but the metaphoric mother tongue, which is an inclusive tongue, not the censorian father tongue, not the hierarchical tongue, but the tongue of inclusivity, the tongue where maps change, the tongue that sometimes is in silence, but is always on the verge of song. So I would like my colleagues to explain to you exactly the contours of how we work in these 3 very important programs. We'll try and keep it brief. Thank you for your time, and thank you very much indeed.
Your Holiness and all our friends gathered here. As Dr. Gopinath shared, Seema and I will just briefly share some of our learnings from 3 of our projects that we've been working on for the last 16 years. And what we are very excited about is the fact that this manual really resonates with a lot of the work that we've been doing in areas of conflict and working for education for peace in South Asia. And so we just draw your attention to some of the ways in which we've been addressing these ideas, and it's a very exciting time for us also because we've learned a lot from the manual as well and many important takeaways. So very briefly, the 3 projects that we just share here with you. The first one, as Dr. Gopinath mentioned, was building bridges for coexistence, transforming change makers in India and Pakistan. The second is an Education for Peace initiative, cutting across myriad fault lines of class, gender, caste, religion, ethnicity in India. And the third is a postgraduate diploma that we helped design and transact at Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi in the year 2005. And some modules of that diploma have now been used by Delhi University as well. It's called Conflict Transformation and Peace Building, and there's a very important section on forgiveness and reconciliation in that diploma program. So we just briefly touch on that. But coming back to our initiative with youth leaders from India and Pakistan, from 2001 to 2012, we brought together 400 youth leaders in the age group of 18 to 35 years to really build their personal capacity, their professional capacity, to build trust, to build empathy, to step into the shoes of the other, and to extend these circles of compassion to such an extent, as Your Holiness, you were mentioning, that your enemies, your adversaries are included in those circles of compassion. And that then completely transforms the adversarial relationships and the conflicts altogether. And we were able to accomplish a lot. We have an evaluation here which we published, which we will be happy to share with you. And we used a quote by Mohandas Gandhi during the course of this project. He said, 3/4 of the miseries and misunderstandings in the world will disappear if we step into the shoes of the adversaries and understand their standpoint. Very quickly, one very important theory of change for this program, which we've discussed this morning, also was that the cultivation of empathy to a point where individuals embrace a shared common humanity, particularly with those perceived as enemies, is an important prerequisite for preventing social violence and building a future where our children can coexist peacefully. And we kept engaging with this sort of, because it was the India-Pakistan context, we kept engaging with this cyclical relationship between personal change, relational change, institutional change, structural change. But every time we would come back to that conclusion that social change can happen when personal change has happened, when you have inner peace. As we've been discussing. And it was very interesting in our feedback where we had some of our alumni talk about the kinds of things that they had been able to do in terms of influencing policy and influencing the institutions where they worked, educational media institutions, because of that inner transformation that happened at these trainings on conflict transformation. And then very quickly, I'll just talk about how interfaith dialogue was a very important part of these workshops, because both the Pakistanis and the Indians came from very diverse backgrounds. Neither represented a homogeneous group, so it was very important to recognize the diverse religious and cultural traditions that they came from, and hence the need for the sacred secular, the interfaith dialogue dimension of it. And what was also very interesting was we realized that it's actually a practical necessity, which even the manual talks about, that when you are nourishing the internal capacity of adversaries for nonviolence, for empathy, it's a practical necessity to coexist peacefully in a plural society like India or South Asia. And coming to just a little bit on the evaluation part of the program, it was very interesting. One of our Pakistani alumna, she quoted Karen Armstrong in her feedback when she talked about the need to cultivate compassion at multiple levels. And so quoting Karen Armstrong, she said, within the home, we treat our family members with the same respect that we wish from them. At the level of the collective, we show compassion to those who are different from us, as well as those who disagree with us. At a global level, we treat other nations as we wish our country to be treated. And so there was this sort of resonance of this, this statement, coming from Christianity, that do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And we could see that in the feedback forms of the Indians and the Pakistanis. And in the endline evaluation, it was very interesting. 66% of our participants felt that self-awareness, empathy, and critical thinking were the foundation for social change between India and Pakistan. And then I'll just maybe share one quote from one of our participants. This is she's an educator from Peshawar, and in the endline evaluation she said, I discovered at the workshop that my greatest power to positively transform the bilateral conflict ultimately rested in the ability to create peace from within. When we analyze the societies of India and Pakistan, we find a general tendency towards violence, emotional outbursts, and proliferation of conflicts at all levels. In my view, the basic reason for the prevalent attitude is the absence of inner peace. One cannot achieve external peace until and unless there is peace inside the person herself. Inner peace leads to compassion and social healing. It eschews revenge. It reminds us that reconciliation begins with our inner self. The absence of inner peace deprives us of compassion and love for humanity beyond territories and ideologies. And very quickly, I'll just talk about the diploma program that we helped start in 2005 at Lady Shri Ram College. One component of the program was on forgiveness and reconciliation. And we sort of really connected with the ethical dilemmas that you talk about in the manual, because when we discussed forgiveness, particularly in the context of social violence, in the absence of justice, that becomes a very significant ethical dilemma, and how to engage with that. So we used Simon Wiesenthal's book, The Sunflower, on the possibilities and limits of forgiveness as a core text when we discussed forgiveness. And in fact, Your Holiness, there is a response from you as well to a convention that Simon Wiesenthal had organized in the 1970s. And He invited 56 religious, spiritual leaders, including atheists, to ask them what their response would have been to this question. And for those of you who don't know Simon Wiesenthal, he was a survivor of the Jewish Holocaust, and he lost 21 members of his family. When he was in the Nazi concentration camp, a dying Nazi soldier asked him for forgiveness. And the Nazi soldier was a Christian, so he said, I'm dying and I need your forgiveness to be able to go to heaven. And Simon Wiesenthal did not forgive this man. And so you have this story unfolding and people's responses. But I think it's what is very relevant is the fact that in contexts where there is social violence, we really have to, it has to be an elicitive approach where the students go back to the traditions in which they have been raised and they look at this question, this tense relationship between forgiveness in the absence of justice and then how do you reconcile. We also looked at stories from Northern Ireland, from South Africa. We looked at some of Gandhi's writings and speeches, and particularly what he said when his would-be assassin tried to assassinate him on 2 occasions and failed, and Gandhi's unconditional forgiveness for his assassin. Some of the questions that we engaged with in this diploma program were, are there limits to forgiveness? Do we need to make a distinction between personal and collective forgiveness? Is it different when we are forgiving on behalf of our community or our family and when it's individual level forgiveness? What does our culture or our religion teach us about these concepts and how do we adapt these? And how important is the sequence of atonement, apology, expression of remorse for forgiveness and reconciliation? So these were some of the issues that we engaged with, and we found the example of Kelly that you shared so interesting because in some of the classes we engaged with the lens of restorative justice and looked at how you humanize people on death row, how you humanize the so-called offender, and how justice is really all about a dialogue between victims and offenders and humanizing the other. So that was very useful to sort of hear about, and I'll hand over to Seema.
Your Holiness and everyone present here, I'll take a brief moment from the work that already Dr. Gopinath and Manjari have shared. Some of the learnings from our work on building bridges across India and Pakistan fault lines brought us in touch with a lot of educators and people from Kashmir. And one of the things that was brought forth during this work that we did was that there is a need to work with a younger cohort. And so from 2007 onwards, we started to work with schools. And one of the opportunities that was provided, or the window that opened for us, was that the Indian National Curriculum Framework of 2005, that's the NCF, which is the guiding document for schools across India, had 2 very interesting ideas which resonated for us from what we had learned from His Holiness's ideas. And those were creating a constructivist classroom and creating young people who have caring concern for their fellow citizens. So these were 2 principles which were the fundamental principles of the NCF 2005 document. And a lot of energy was generated around educating for peace during these years as well in India, and a kind of an adaptation of peace education as it was being practiced in the West. What happened was that for us, working in areas of conflict had brought to us the challenges that come from when you are in such hostile environment where anger, mistrust, resentment, and almost a very severe form of alienation is so rampant. How do you bring education for peace or peace education or ethics into such an environment? That was a very big challenge for us. And even though at that time we didn't have the Emory University's protocol, we did have His Holiness guiding us in some ways where he told us to explore idea of transformative leadership, look at leaders who have a compassionate heart. So we started to explore and started to use some of these modules in different schools, in colleges and university spaces. The idea, as Dr. Gopinath already explained, was that we look at educational spaces as liberatory spaces. So these not just liberate us from ignorance, but liberate us in many more ways, liberate us from prejudice, from discrimination and arrogance. And in the past 3 years, we have worked very concertedly in Kashmir with schools, with colleges, and create kinds of ecosystems where secular ethics and the values that you talk about in your protocol can actually flourish, can flower. And so we've been doing this work, and also some of the research that we had been doing through our Scholar of Peace fellowship program over a long period of time, which was looking at understanding conflict better, understanding causes of violence better, understanding where a lot of hostility in the entire South Asian region is coming from. So in Sri Lanka, the conflict between the Tamils and the Sinhalese, in Bangladesh, the Chittagong Hill Tracts, in the northeast of India, and of course India and Pakistan, Nepal, the Maoist conflict and the civil war, and the kind of hostilities and anger it had generated amongst people. How do you grapple with many of these things? So that research fed into the work that we were trying to do at the ground level, at the local level, with the educational institutions. So we tried to design what we thought were age-appropriate modules, given the time frames that we had, 2 to 5 days or sometimes a week, spread over 6 months, and at most I think we've had 3 years of continuous engagement with some of the schools. And when you talk about evaluation, in whatever way we have been able to evaluate and assess this work that we've done, and how far we have succeeded in bringing about change, I mean, we have a great deal of enthusiasm, because there are a lot of success stories where young people have come back and told us that they have forged friendships across this so-called severe divide of, Hindu, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Christian, Muslim, Kashmiri, non-Kashmiri, Buddhist, Muslim. So we have, like, anecdotally a lot of evidence where people have said that there's been a great deal of empathy, there's a great deal of trust that has been built. They feel personally transformed. Educators coming back and saying that over a long period of time, their own personal relationships in their families have been impacted by these modules, the trainings that they have attended, and then the way that they have had the conversations and the dialogues with their own students in the classroom. So I will not go into more detail and rest our case here in terms of the work that we really feel inspired by what has been shared today across this table, and we are taking back so many of the ideas to inform our work, and as His Holiness says, take it and expand the Foundation's work in the future too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think now there's a time for discussion. So, who would Emory like to say something at this point?
First of all, I'd like to thank all the presenters for really inspiring work that you have done and shared here with us today. As I mentioned in the beginning, that the curriculum that we have developed is in a very kind of early phase. It will obviously need to go through many changes and transformation, and we will take many of the insights shared today here, and as we update this document further, take those into the consideration. And it's been truly an inspiring day for us. Just a few comments that I wanted to make. the curriculum itself was a product of just of many people, but for a very short period of work, for about 2 months or so. So it was a really quick work, but by many teachers whose work have been lifetime, they were lifetime educators. Some of them who have taught as many as 40 years in schools, like people like Jen, just really the master teachers. So while there are various strengths, but obviously we will need to have much more richness to the curriculum. We do understand that. The overall framework for the curriculum is heavily drawn from His Holiness's own works, Ethics for the New Millennium, Beyond Religion, but also a number of other works that His Holiness has done with other people, like whether with the psychiatrist or the neuroscientist, and also the works like Daniel Goleman, who has been an influential person in pioneering the whole education movement called social and emotional learning, and he has recently wrote a book kind of outlining the vision of His Holiness called A Force for Good. So in the curriculum, obviously, that you would see even the kind of the titles, of those competencies. We call it competencies. Obviously, we will keep that in mind, whether we should call them habits, dispositions, skills. There are a number of ways to go about these characters. Sometimes also referred to as character strengths, in the positive psychology now. But you will see like the ethical, mindfulness, emotional awareness, and these kind of constructs are actually drawn from His Holiness's own works. But also, we try to align it as much as possible with the programs like SEL, where they have these 5 skills that they identify: self-awareness, self-management, there's empathy, social skills, and good decision making. Along that, as now we see actually they bring another construct called the systems thinking or the systems learning, and these 3, in this, like the social, emotional, and the systems, the 3, that's what compose the 3 focuses, we do take into account that evolutionarily, as His Holiness has pointed out, that we as mammals have a certain biological kind of, biologically given dispositions towards caring, the kindness, and so forth. But also, these are something that need to be expanded. So therefore, incorporating the very kind of strategies, if you will, to critically arrive at that, at those conclusions oneself, rather than taught, and that's why the second level understanding, the critical insight, has to be kind of cultivated through the children or the students themselves, engaging in problem solving, kind of the strategies or the experience-based learning and so forth, so that it's not like something that you teach as values, but rather you give them the scenario and the activities where then the students can themselves engage in those discussions and then come up with the solutions. That would be the way to go. it has to. It is based on this new thinking. I think in the West, at least, it must be probably the universally being, noticed that old model, this developmental kind of the model of that our cognition is something that is outdated. That now. The more and more research is showing that children at the very young age, as His Holiness pointed out earlier, like that, even like the 3 months age, they can, they show the preference, towards kindness versus, something that is not. But the skills that children are showing, like the empathy, decision making, the understanding things in a more kind of the systematic level, system, interdependent context and so forth. These seem to be kind of innate capacities, but they need to be expanded, and that's where the curriculum kind of heavily tries to give teachers and the students the tools to how to help kind of expand on those innate skills. I absolutely agree with Meenakshi that the part of the success of this program will have to be training teachers. If the teachers themselves are not aware of these skills or the competencies and are not able to embody it, then it would be very hard to be the facilitators in the classroom for others. So as part of the program, we do intend to build the teacher training material, but also the workshops and so forth and so on. So that would definitely be a part of the program for us. Teaching values is a complicated thing in the school that without kind of giving a sense that the children are bad if they are unable to act in a healthy ways. But the way that this curriculum is built is not to kind of fall in that trap, like building that trap, like but rather to point out that we have weaknesses, we have strengths, and then in a way there is this two track that we have biologically given tendencies towards selfishness, but also the altruistic, and then we need to find ways to how to strengthen those that are positive, and it's not like taught as the values as kind of fundamentally pointing to the children, the students, as they're good or bad if they cannot act in certain ways, but rather to showing that there are weaknesses that can be undone. So these are some of the things that I just wanted to point out, and this is, certainly we're looking at it as a long-term project, and the feedback like this and various other scholars and the experts are giving us, we will going to be updating the document again, and then there will be further sessions, as His Holiness mentioned earlier, that this document will go through various kind of steps of updating and until this can become as something that we can actually roll out in the schools. But it's a start at this point for us. Do you have anything? Thank you.
I think, do you want to speak, Jennifer? Okay. Tenzin, Venerable Tenzin.
I think one of the things that I would like to share from just the large demographic, because Dr. Gopinath has very aptly pointed to this idea of context. Who's designing curriculum for who? Right? one thing that we have to remind ourselves that most of us in this room are immigrants to technology. Right? We have gone through so many variations of technology that we are immigrants to it. The kids that we are designing programs for are native to technology. They are experts in using technology for learning in a way that we could not. In most developed countries, on an average, a 13-year-old kid plays 10,000 hours of video game. If you take any biobehavioral argument, 10,000 hours is what makes you an expert in something. They are expert at something that we cannot relate to, that we have no idea how to utilize these tools. And that's why I think besides lecturing has not worked. It has not worked traditionally in classroom setting. But besides interaction, storyboards, and so on, we should look at creating new tools for this education around ethics. And the second idea of it is making ethics relevant. Why should even kids care about being ethical? We did not. Our generation did not. Our generation simply proposed the idea that being ethical might be a good idea. So making ethics relevant implies that we are not sort of creating a generalized version of ethics, but a specialized version of ethics, meaning how do you become ethical as a doctor? How do you become ethical as an engineer? How do you become ethical as an educator? There has to be these synapses built into the relevancy factor. Otherwise, kids are not able to sustain and keep the motivation for remaining ethical throughout their life cycle of education. It's something that I think we need to constantly think about as we're designing. Who are we designing it for? It looks nice when we read it, but are we really able to transplant the knowledge, especially at a scale of 7 billion human beings?
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to rewind a little bit to Dr. Baniwal's question on something that you also spoke about on the issue of the sort of terminology that the course is using, where we use words like skills instead of values. I just think that I'm slightly uncomfortable with this binary between terms from the West, terms from the East, terms that are more detailed and deliberate and artificial, and terms that are more organic and mystical in a sort of sense. I think that we need to think about that education ultimately, even if it's ethical education, is a project of social engineering. Yes, we are trying to do something very deliberate, manipulating and designing people to think in ways that might not be natural to them. So I think education in itself, if not just ethics, needs to own up to the word that yes, this is an ideology, yes, we are doing something deliberately, yes, it's also a political project, and yes, we are controlling how kids are going to think because we have the ability to control that in this sort of sense. So I think when we're looking at terminology, there are limits to things like abstraction. There's only so much you can do by saying, let's be holistic, let's be more human. And I think that's where terms become important. That's where things like competencies become important because they allow you to break the idea of what a good, ethical, holistic human being is, because that's how we will clarify and streamline things and make sense of them. So I think the struggle to, as Dr. Baniwal said, put together these little elements that we broke up in the first place is not such a bad idea, because I don't think that terms are reductive in a negative sense, but they allow you to do something which doesn't necessarily have to be antithetical to quote-unquote holistic development. And I think that, for example, to say something like there's a competency for kindness doesn't really throw out the baby with the bathwater, because that's the only way you can take out a word like competency from a paradigm where we view it negatively. So to say that there's a competency for kindness makes us think differently about the very idea of competencies and also the idea of kindness. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Since nobody is speaking, so I thought I'll take this opportunity. In nurturing or cultivating anything, we need to take into consideration two factors. One is the facilitating factor, about which I think we spoke in great length, but we hardly spoke about the obstructing factors. Teaching secular ethics is said to be one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. And therefore, it is really important what are the challenges that we are going to face and how are we going to overcome it. Without taking much time, just to give one example. For example, sometimes we do feel that this kind of discourse is like almost like preaching the converts. So those people who would participate, who would listen, are normally those who are already quite good. So what is the method to reach those notorious people or who engage in corruption, who engage in killing, who doesn't want to listen to this kind of discourses? What are the problems with these people, and how are we going to reach to these people? So there are kind of challenges that I think we must see, because it's interesting that this topic, secular ethics education, its acronym is C. So C is very important, because when we talk about developing this ethical education, again, most of us spoke more about the skillful method side, that is compassion, love, forgiveness. Not many spoke about the discriminative awareness, the wisdom part. Because unless we have a precise wisdom, awareness that sees the reality, we may be overwhelmed when we suddenly, unexpectedly encounter certain problems, which is bound to come. So I felt that I should mention these small points. Yeah.
I think I may add, already corrupted, corrupted mind, a generation who already corrupted, I think we cannot do much. Let them face consequences. Now, also the aim is future generation, from childhood, some awareness about this inner value. Then systematic teaching. Then there is hope. See, at a young age, quite pure. Once, like I think our generation, we suppose we have more experience, I think experience of negative things. So very difficult to change. Only weapon can change. Then violence, counter-violence, no end. Already sort of spoiled Chesarabata, Soja Kaustare. Tanga to Maumbala, and the Hamid, Miro Yatus, young Edzo, Tangone, Chick sing with Dingne, Yijish, the Zawa Sergio, Nia Cadon, Natango, Sosu Yield, Keban Yudevich. The Yao Chumodu Shetuna, any conduct Zawa said, Ranshik Tangdu layer of Chumoina, and the Tandu can remember. Tangdus Kasri, she loved it. Tangdus Kasri. Today's world, see, I think there's hardly, you see, some kind of appreciation about this inequality. So such sort of society, very difficult, you see, to change. And if this goes continuously, then no hope. More suffering. I think the 20th century of violence, that simply repeat the 21st century, also more violent century. What benefit? As I mentioned earlier, still there is hope. Basic human nature is more compassionate. That's the basis of hope. So education should sort of help that basic nature to further develop and nurture the way. And then, as I briefly mentioned, I feel, for example, our own experience, you see, study the system of emotion, system of mind, then we become better equipped how to tackle this destructive emotion. So out of knowledge, not just enthusiasm, so fuller knowledge about the whole system of emotion, then you see we can deal much easier, much effective. So therefore, knowledge about the whole system of emotion is important. Traditionally, these are, we consider, part of religion. As far as Buddhism is concerned, all Buddhist literature many Buddhist literature is mentioned about these things, but as a part of Buddhist teaching. That is now, I think, we should make clear. Actually, last few years, out of 300 volumes, Kanjur and Tenjur, we divided 3 parts according to the content. Content. One part science, one part philosophy, one part religion. So, third part, religion, only for Buddhist. Then the first part, as a science, is a part of academic subject. So it's relevant to everybody. So nowadays, when we talk about the importance of our mind and those destructive sort of emotions, I think everybody, loves affection, not anger. Isn't it? That's nature, even animal, as I mentioned this morning briefly. So therefore, now this marvelous intelligence, if you accept the Creator, then I think best gift from God is this intelligence. Animal also have some extent their love. So intelligence is only human being. Now, unfortunately, we utilize this best gift from Creator used wrong way. So counter for that, I think also is God, give us part of His own sort of experience or sort of good quality, that is love. If you accept Creator. We Buddhists and Jains, no concept of Creator, so we quite free. I think really the concept of God, Creator, is very, very powerful, wonderful, wonderful. So each different concept or philosophical views, wonderful to different people, different mental disposition. Oh, music. Now I think they indicate time for music, not serious discussion. So like that, yes?
Yes, we will.
Actually, to
So you,
because
of the universal responsibility, right? You're sort of, I think, because of the really committed, the harmony, these different parts, right? At least within India and Kashmir, these wonderful. I think a few years ago, one occasion I was in Jerusalem. I met a small group, Jewish, Palestine, small group. Their aim is try to create genuine friendship and expel sort of distrust, these two groups of people. So at that time, I told them, no matter how small, this is seed of future. You should expand. So I told, so your activities, till you reported, nobody told me, so small. But this is seed. You further, Kazota, carry this work. Then I think the modern time, media also have very powerful sort of also the Kazota, powerful tool. So let them see and tell. I think that then is more and more people, out of awareness, then may pay more attention about these things. Otherwise, no matter how sincere, you carry small work. Nobody knows.
So, Your Holiness, actually, what Geshe Lakdurla is talking about, we've experienced a lot of it in Kashmir in our work. where young people who were born in the 1990s, in the period when the conflict has been at a height, were very averse to any dialogue or talking about values, talking about empathy and compassion. And some of these young people from the colleges and universities initially came out with a great deal of cynicism. But over a period of time, something worked and something touched their hearts too. And they've, in fact, some of them had the opportunity to meet with His Holiness last year at one of the schools in Delhi then. And they was very enthusiastic. And His Holiness may not know that some of them were stone pelters who had been arrested and very violent. They came and they had also met with His Holiness and were really touched also by that experience. So reaching out to those who are not converted. And this cycle of violence and more violence and more violence is creating a situation where young people by the age of 25 are fed up. They're tired of this violence. And even they are looking for avenues. And if education spaces are not providing, community is not providing that space. So in a small way, the foundation is trying to reach out in these and creating those spaces where some healing and some kind of movement towards forgiveness and trust building can happen. And also, Your Holiness, we are trying to work with the young journalists as well, talking about peace journalism, which is a methodology of reporting on conflicts in a manner that it does not ignite more violence, but leads to actually people recognizing multiple perspectives. So we are trying to do that. Thank
Then
you.
also I want to mention, you see, as far as the knowledge about emotions, about mind, these are scholars. You see, they several years, you see, they study these things. So now time come, their knowledge must share with world, not as Buddhism, but purely science of mind. So I told, now since many years, you see, our monastic institution, they should pay some attention about science. And then, beside that, I think I see both sides, the potential out of our knowledge, something useful for humanity. And also, you see, the modern institution, universities, say they something lacking. There, our knowledge, I think, can be useful. But so far, it's a very little sort of the contact, or interaction. So both sides have the responsibility. I usually suggest to our American Kishi, at the abbot of Radio Kembo, the American. So he should sort of carry more study, which universities or which sort of institution you see really showing sort of interest where our knowledge can be used. I give him some kind of work. I requested. Then do the and then also you see another my friend is Indian. You see should investigate how many Indian universities or institutions you see sincerely you see, showing interest or not. Then you see, our knowledge, and then meantime, Tibetan side. Now, therefore, you see, there's a new bhikshu, which a few days ago I ordained. Then another, the Kasa, Ramesh Samare, your son, Ka.
Atisha.
Oh, Adisha, speak Tibetan very well, and also I think the very good knowledge about Buddhist philosophy, these knowledge. So these people, now time come, I think should be useful. Your knowledge, one half, you see, the Buddhist study or Nalanda tradition, according to our sort of Tibetan tradition, you know. Also, you see, you are Indian. Also, you should know this modern sort of situation. So you have the Kasoda, I think, key role, making closer and use information, something useful for modern world. Take like that. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Then Sampenla, you speak first. Yeah.
I will. I'll come in. Your Holiness, that this is a very important initiative, like in the sense that we, as a university, we deal with poverty, deprivation, and marginalization. And I think as the problems mount, we also work in very many different locations, and we also produce Government of India's Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellows to work in some 160 districts affected by violence. Today I just got a message that the Chhattisgarh government wants us to create Chief Minister's Rural Development Fellows. So broadly what happens is that as the conflicts grow, as poverty is intensifying, as marginalization intensifying, it's very important for us to find ways whereby we can address those issues. 7 years ago, we brought Daniel Goldman and his team to my university to talk about emotional intelligence. But what happened was that much of it were taken away by the industries and did very well. Okay, where we were, when it came to working with school principals and others, I think it takes time, but we haven't given up on that. I think we have a very long-standing collaboration with the Iowa team and Professor Goldman. That's one part of it. So I have a request here. The request is that we want to develop a course to offer to my students. The Tata Institute of Social Sciences has about 4,500 students. Okay, and in addition to that, we also work with schools across the country and with the governments. So, can a group come together to work with us? The foundation and other colleagues here come together to develop a curriculum and also support us to train our teachers. And we could bring in other teachers to come and teach. This is the request I'm making. And when the Tata Institute of Social Sciences start a particular course, then others do. That has been the tradition in this country. So that's where what I am trying to tell you is that, please come together and I make this request, and that's it. Thank you. Yeah, she seems to be a little restless actually. You seems to be a little restless when I speak. Is there a problem?
Been waiting. Venerable Santanla.
Yeah.
Sampenla, and then
Mathur. Yes.
Am I on?
Lawyer, great lawyer, and Buddhist scholar.
I just wanted to share with our friends from Emory some experiences of a project not so dissimilar to this. It was in the context of Shri Aurobindo and integral education, and an attempt to secularize the teaching of Shri Aurobindo into integral education. Now, they had certain experiences, and I want to share them with you. First, they said that where they tried to inject integral education into the curriculum in an existing school, they said it invariably failed where the management culture did not support it. So they said that the management culture is critical, that it be consistent and conducive to the experiment. One. Two, he said in this entire process, and this has come up several times during the course of the day, that the teacher is critical because the teacher has to be the embodiment of the value or the competency. So they spare no effort in their resource center in training the teachers rigorously, very rigorously. Third, he argued very strongly. He said he read this manual. He had a good look at this manual. He looked at the competencies, and he was aware that His Holiness is of His Holiness's intention. But he said that, look, this is prescriptive. And you have 10 competencies, you have a chronological order in which you want to proceed. He said, this may just become another subject, another class, another period in school. And when it's over, you get your grade, and then you go home. And he said, this is not what you want to do. This is not what you want to do. So he was saying, can there be some way in which it is made non-prescriptive? It is made experiential, and to evolve from an experience of the idea. So I just thought that I would place this because I think there is some value in this suggestion, in these three suggestions. Yeah, thank you.
Gishi something.
I would like to suggest that when we take these secular ethics into school, we should not take it into bits and pieces, rather with a holistic approach. There is a very profound philosophical background to understand the secular ethics, and also there is a very sophisticated system of mind training, which is already very holistic, and each of these, either it is a negative emotion or it is a positive emotion, they are very much correlated. And in order to develop the positive emotion, we must deal with the negative emotion and destructive emotion, how to deal with them and how to overcome, and then how to enhance the positive emotions. So in order to do this, we must have a holistic approach and the deeper aspect of the entire ethics and emotions in general. So otherwise, for example, we have been listening to the forgiveness this morning. They are all very excellent. But I think if we can incorporate it with the deeper philosophy and also with the other components of emotion and their development, and then how to counteract with these negative emotions, then the forgiveness is not just forgiveness, one emotion by itself, but it is connected with the many destructive emotions. What comes on the way when we develop forgiveness, and also how we can enhance forgiveness with other components of the positive emotions. So there are lots of things. It itself is a whole world to learn. So it is a lifelong kind of training that one has to go through. So therefore, if it is to be introduced, this curriculum is wonderful, excellent. And together with this, I think the other literatures, primarily with the ethics for new millennium and beyond religion, must be introduced for a sound foundation of this whole course. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. His Holiness has often said that each one of us is different, and we need a different mental diet, just like we need other diets. So I think we would be misplaced if our aspiration was that this was somehow going to become the single approach that would be universally applicable. I think what we're doing is we're putting out into the world something that will be suitable for particular mental diets. I just wanted to flag that, and also to suggest that certainly in India, many years ago we had an interaction with His Holiness with different religious leaders. This was when this idea was taking birth, and so His Holiness suggested the idea that could we look at secular ethics, and would the other religious traditions be willing to go along? And without exception, they all rejected it, and they said no, values can only ride on their particular religious traditions. And if there is only 1 million or 2 million people who are not, I think it would also be useful to look at some of the materials, because after all, there are many common aspirations of different religious traditions as to what the Ramakrishna Mission is doing, what the madrasas are doing, and what are the other traditions doing in order to cultivate the similar values that we're sharing. And the third thing I wanted to really flag, as being also in the communication business, that the essence of any strategy, any communication strategy, is what are the resistors to communication, and to try and go through a process of, as specifically as possible, identifying those resistors as a part of the exercise of developing protocols, and also in terms of the feedback that we give. What are the resistors of communication? As you can see, we've had a communication gap right here in terms of our own work. And so I think that the simultaneous communication strategy, for want of a better word, is seminal to this aspiration.
I think, for example, the concept of one religion, one truth, in the past, very strong. So according to the Christian, the believer, Christian, little bit sort of orthodox way, then we non-Christian, our future destination is hell. Now that kind of sort of attitude, now thinking already changing. The Vatican, during the late Polish Pope, you see, they already accepted there are different traditions. So already, you see, they accept several truths, several religions. So secular, you see, those people who believe, you see, this secular, I think this word, some my friend, some Muslim, some Christian, they very much sort of reserve the word secular. They consider secular as something negative towards religion. And then also, some my friend, you see, mentioned secular is some similarity with atheism. Then, of course, if you consider secular that way, then you cannot go with religion. But here in India, so therefore, you see, the last year, you see, you see, some scholars, you see, mentioned the very word secular is a little bit sort of they
said it's a little bit problematic to use the term.
One young Indian, you see, support that word, isn't it? Secular. According to that. Sorry,
Didn't appear that.
말이 되게 안 들려서. 자, 신진데 계시지. 신진소. 그래, 뭐래? No.
He moved his seat.
So like that. So I think this maybe our presentation make clear. Actually, in the reality, as a matter of fact, secular, the topic we are saying, human compassion, is the basis of all major world religions. Use different philosophical views, the same purpose, same message. So, the topic which we are discussing and we are trying to promote among the humanity is actually the basis of all religions. Any person, any religious person who believe these value, then different religious tradition immense helpful, you see, to further promote these values. A person who believe God or something without firm conviction these things, then religion also become corrupted religion. Isn't it? Now some sort of strange religious person, also you see there, mischievous religious person also there. Now for example, the conflict in the name of religion, clearly lack of this sort of sense of, the oneness of humanity. Although they repeated all humanity created by God, whole world created by God. In spite of saying that, they actually make distinction. We and they, my faith, their faith. So all this, I think, a negative thing among the believer, I think due to lack of real conviction, the value of compassion, these things. I feel that. So again, awareness. And then the wording, the secular or some other, that I don't know. So here, no Englishmen who have the authority, this word. Oh, no one. Yamarwa. I think some Oxford. Jeremy, yes. You have the authority to make because of meaning, because of definite meaning about secular. You're also quite old Englishman, so now younger Englishmen maybe different views, different understanding.
The lawyer.
There's some debate.
Very clear historical context. Europe is coming out of a 100-year war. In 1750, there is the Treaty of Westphalia, in which, in this Treaty of Westphalia, because of the overarching authority of the church, about a few hundred kings actually want to separate from the church. So they are carving out a state which is separate from the church. And they do not want the church to have any authority over the state. That is why it becomes atheistic. That is why most of the European states, we can call them atheistic equidistancing. They want to stand at an equal distance from every religion. So what Your Holiness says is absolutely right. It is virtually atheistic, in Europe at least. And then that idea came into the Indian constitution. And only very recently the Supreme Court has interpreted as Sarvadharma Nirpeksha. So in a very different way in which India should have always treated the word secular. But because of independence and the constitution and whatever those processes were from 50, till almost 2010, even the Supreme Court interpreted the word secular in a very damaging way.
I see.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on the point that was made earlier about the need for the development of universal curriculum, respecting the different cultures that exist around the world. And I can say this because I have nothing to do with it. But at the risk of embarrassing my friend, Tenzin Priyadarshi, Tenzin and his team have worked for quite a number of years at His Holiness' request to develop just such a curriculum. And it's had application not just in business schools in the United States, but in Canada, in Indonesia, in Russia, in Mexico, and a variety of other countries. The appealing part of the curriculum is it's taught in a Socratic method, in the sense that there is no prefabricated solution or prescriptive formula to ethics, but through questions posed to the students, you work on the assumption that the students themselves have the capacity to be able to answer these questions themselves, because, as His Holiness has pointed out many times today, these are things that we actually have inside of us. You just have to find a good teacher, like the teachers here, to be able to extract it. So it's a practical point I wanted to make, that you're not necessarily starting from a clean sheet of paper. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I think I should now try to wrap things up. I think it's way past our time that we had set. So I'd just like to, before I hand over to Madhulika for the vote of thanks, I'd request His Holiness, would you like to say a few words?
No, nothing. As I mentioned, I think they mentioned, I think this is not something, you see, they finalize these things. I think start our work, and then perhaps annually, or if not, I think every 2 years, come and then discuss and collect, see, more sort of suggestions or views. Then further sort of improve our sort of the curriculum. Then also, you see, we can also decide and let, you see, carry some schools, then watch the result. And then teachers who, and also students who actually, you see, carrying, you see, these sort of the curriculum will see the result and collect their views, their suggestions. Go that way, and then gradually more acceptable sort of the curriculum or the text can develop like that.
So taking a cue from that, I would like to just suggest that perhaps we may think or feel that today we begin with the curriculum that Emory University has brought to the table, but also look at what Lakdola called the challenges that we face, as Rajiv ji also talked about, the resistors to this. And I think if we recognize, as you said, the obstructing factors we have not even really considered in depth. So I think taking that on board, and many of us did share that the greatest challenge is the teacher. How are we going to work with the teacher? And one suggestion is that perhaps His Holiness's advice of having continuous dialogue, I would like to propose something that also Geshe Samtenla was suggesting, that we have a series of workshops for teachers through this year. And I would really not like to lose them, because we worked hard for only 3 or 4 months, but we have got some teachers on board. And I think I would like to see this going forward. So if Emory is willing, you just mentioned that you have also a plan to bring teacher education material on board. But why don't we actually conduct, and maybe keeping the same teachers and involving some other teachers, carry this through the year over a series of 4 or 5 workshops, where there is a continuous engagement with not just the curriculum, but with the philosophical basis of some of the what you call competencies or skills or dispositions or habits that we want to see as being part of this. We continuously engage with it. And that will then bring us to a stage where we can actually sit again collectively around the table to see where it's gone. Not simply if we meet after 1 year or 2 years, Your Holiness, that may be just too long. So I think we should move faster rather than slower, so if everybody is willing, maybe we can take it from there so that we learn also from your work. That should be part of it. It should not be segregated as being some, so we can see these different situations and contexts, because otherwise we are also talking about the contextual context as being only that of the underprivileged and the privileged, but there's also the whole field of conflict and of religious difference and of caste and all of that. So I think all of this needs to be integrated, and then have these series of workshops where we look at teacher education as one module, look at specific competencies, we can take specific competencies, have each workshop around one or two themes, just focus on those with the same set of teachers. So some commitment from the teachers and some commitment from us all would be really go a long way in taking this work forward.
Very good.
I thank you so much, Your
Thank
Holiness.
you.
I request Madhulika Sonkar from the University of Delhi to offer a vote of thanks.
We would like to thank His Holiness the Dalai Lama for initiating this project on secular ethics in education. Thank you, Your Holiness, for motivating us and steering us to a beginning we are all working on and imagining it together. Thank you for also giving the D.S. Kothari Center and Delhi University the opportunity to be engaged in this work, which is just so essential for education in contemporary world. We are immensely grateful to the scholars from Emory University for having initiated the process of formal training in ethics in education, and it's a really well thought out and informed curriculum. Thank you so much. We hope and we will be privileged to have further engagement with your team to take this successful and meaningful journey ahead. We would also like to thank Mr. Tempa Sering, representative of His Holiness in Delhi, for his constant coordination and support, the readiness with which he participated in all the meetings, and the constant engagement and support that he has offered is deeply appreciated. We are also thankful to the Dalai Lama Trust for arranging and sponsoring this grand event today. We also thank the Bureau of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for all their hard work in preparing for the event today. We express deep gratitude to Dr. Amita Vatal, Principal, Springdale School, Pusa Road. Dr. Vatal helped us reach out to numerous school teachers, and we could not have imagined taking this project without her support, commitment, and coordination. Thanks a lot. Springdale School hosted the kickoff meeting in January, from where the teachers actually began their journey, and we are grateful to Madam Shuchi Bajaj, Senior History Teacher at the Springdale School, for facilitating that workshop and providing us with vital contributions in the brainstorming sessions that we had later. We thank Dr. Anuradha Sharma, Associate Professor in Sociology at Jesus and Mary College, Delhi University. Dr. Sharma has been a part of this initiative since the outset and provided us with Hindi translations of the curriculum draft, amongst several other intellectual contributions in the course of this journey. We would also like to thank Professor Nawang Samtanla, Vice Chancellor of Central University of Tibetan Studies at Sarnath, for his engagement with the project and for the participation in the first workshop. The resource team has been instrumental across various stages of the project, and we would especially like to thank Geshe Dorji Damdullah, Director, Tibet House, Dr. Vikas Baniwal from the Central Institute of Education, Delhi University, and the team from Viscomp and Sri Rajiv Mehrotra. Critical inputs, feedback, intellectual support by Professor Vivek Suneja, Mr. Naresh Mathur, Ms. Antonella Mathur, and others have been really pivotal in the brainstorming sessions that we have had. And all the brainstorming sessions that were held at Professor Thapan's residence, India Habitat Center, Tibet House, and Delhi University, each and every contribution matters a lot.
Yeah, we would also like to thank all of the individual teachers we are indebted to, Ms. Tanya Chadda, Ms. Seema Mehta from the Convent of Jesus and Mary, Ms. Ranjana Narayan and Ms. Namita Sabharwal from Springdale's Pusa Road, Ms. Gayatri Mandhata from GD Goenka School, Ghaziabad, Ms. Anusuya Chandi and Anant Jyoti Dasari from all the way in Rishi Valley School, Andhra Pradesh, Ms. Anuradha Goyal from Bal Bharti Public School, Pusa Road, and Ms. Meenu Sharma and Ms. Priya Arsoni from Bal Bharti Public School, Rohini, for so generously taking out the time to attend all of our workshops, for conducting such thoughtful sessions with their students, and finally for coming here today to present us with their valuable feedback. We're indebted to them and the principals of their respective schools for their kind cooperation and enthusiasm for this project. We'd also like to thank the teachers and principals of Ramjas School, Muni International, New Era Public School, Mahavir Senior Model School, the FO School, Vasant Valley School, and Bluebells International for having been a part of some of our previous workshops and sharing their valuable expertise with us. Finally, thanks to Devika Mittal and Madhulika Sonkar from the Department of Sociology, Delhi University, for all their work in pulling together all our workshops so far, and the staff of Hotel Sheraton for their services to us. And finally, we express our gratitude to everyone in the audience for their patience and their participation today. Thank you so much.
Oh.